up with marketing ideas, that sort of thing, rather than just creating the product and shipping it out. I try and set aside time every day to think about the business as a whole.
I think that is, later on I'll be asking you to give some tips to new businesses, but I think that's the first one. Spend an hour a day working on the business, not in it. So tell us a bit about the name of the company. So this is a name that you made up some time ago, and the company's changed. So does the name still sit with the company?
It does, I think. So originally I wasn't called Jolly Penguin, I was called So Domesticated. And it felt very small businessy, if you know what I mean. It felt very sitting at the kitchen table, sewing stuff and, for your friends and family type level of that name. And when I moved out to France, I had a major issue that the locals could neither pronounce it nor remember it, which made it very difficult to promote myself out here. So I knew I needed to rebrand. And I opened a shop back in May for the summer periods because it's very touristy around here. So there's definitely a summer play time when it's worth having a shop and a winter when it's really not. So I opened a shop for the summer, and I knew at that point that I would need a name that would work in French. And So Domesticated really doesn't. And I looked at abbreviations of So Domesticated and unfortunately discovered that if I abbreviated it, it became very rude slang. So I couldn't go down that route either. So I knew I needed to start again, and I needed something that would work in both languages because I'm marketing in both countries. And the penguin logo was always part of my brand from the word go. The logo itself has evolved and changed slightly, but it's still recognisably the same penguin as it was when I started. And so I wanted to keep that penguin. It's a family emblem, for want of a better description. My dad's nickname is Penguin because he walks like one, and it's been something that's always been in the family. So I wanted to keep the logo. It also helped customers to see that whilst the name had changed, I was still me. And I needed something that worked in both languages. And I spent a long time looking at things like Petit Bateau and how they marketed in England, because obviously they use their French name in England and the English cope with it just fine. And I started looking at Petit Pingouin, and then I realised that the word penguin is quite tricky to spell for the English. For most people, if you're not fluent in French, it's not an easy word to spell naturally. So then I looked at other formations. How could I get it so that it had the same initials? And Jolie and Jolly, whilst they don't mean exactly the same, Jolie being nice, they were similar enough that people would be able to remember it in their own language. So if they searched in French, it would come up. If they searched in English, it would come up. So that's how Jolly Penguin or Jolly Penguin became.
Wow, another great story. So tell us a bit about coming to France from the UK and trading in two different markets.
It's been a huge learning curve, a really huge. I naively thought that it'll be okay. I've got an internet-based business. I can move to a different country, and the only thing that will change is the cost of postage. And then I got here, and I was introduced to the French bureaucratic system. Now, it helps that in a previous life, I was a French teacher, so my French is really good. But I got here in September, and my son had broken his leg, so he couldn't go to school for the first 3 months. And so during that time, I set about trying to register the business over here. In Britain, we've got the HMRC, and it's really nice and straightforward. In France, it's really not. Depending on what sort of business you are, you register with a different body. So there's the Chamber of Commerce for resellers, effectively. And then for anyone that's creating stuff from scratch, there's what's called the Chambre de Métier. And I discovered that they require you to do a week-long course before you can actually register at quite a big cost. That was, I think, €250. And so I couldn't legally run my business until I'd done that course. And so having moved in September, the first course I could get on was the end of October. So I had 2 months where I couldn't legally run a business. eventually I got registered, and the fortune that costs, because they don't like to make it cheap and they don't like to make it easy for you here. And I started trading, and that December I did my first Christmas market in Bergerac. And I sold okay, but only okay. And I was really disappointed. And I realised from the feedback of the customers there that the French were viewing what I sold as pyjamas, and so weren't willing to pay the prices that I was charging for pyjamas. And obviously there's a legal connotation as well of selling pyjamas with the labelling, the keep away from fire labels and things like that, and testing. So I realised I needed to change how I was doing things for the French, because my style is very different to the traditional French children's clothes. The kids in France wear jeans, all of them. If you're lucky, you might see a child in a pair of leggings with a skirt, but you certainly wouldn't see them with leggings just as they are. And that really took me a minute to work out what I was going to do. And they also like their kids, if they're going to buy from a shop, they really like to buy matching sets. And I didn't have enough matching sets available, because the way I tend to dress my kids is I'll put on a boring pair of trousers and a funky t-shirt, or a funky pair of trousers and a boring t-shirt, to try and balance out the costs of buying all handmade. And so I realised that to be able to market to the French, I need to be marketing things differently to how I market to the Brits. And that took me quite a long time to get my head around. And the other thing that I've still not perfected is that the French are much further behind the English, on the whole, not always, with regards to internet shopping. Their first port of call will be their supermarket, then the market, and internet shopping will be a last resource if they can't get what they want locally. And so that for me was a real challenge, because that's my main marketing point, is I sell, to anyone, anywhere. And suddenly one of my key audiences wasn't even looking for me.
Wow. And all of those things are cultural understandings that you can only really understand if you live there. It'd be very hard to
I'd been
learn
I'd been a French teacher for years, so I have a good cultural understanding of French and the French and how it works. And it still came as a real culture shock for me. I wasn't expecting that.
I bet. So now when you look back, when you think of that moment, okay, we're going to move to France, I'm going to take this business with me, and this is how it's going to work. How does your vision of how you're going to succeed now differ from back then?
I think I was very naive back then. Back then I thought I could just run it purely on the internet, and the French, as long as I had the French SEO set up, the French would find me. And that I'd run a French Facebook page, and it would be just like running my English Facebook page, but I'd put the posts in French. And it's taken me quite a long time, I'll be honest, to realise that actually I need to market completely differently to the two of them. And within France, I'm looking far more at being stocked within local baby boutiques rather than selling through my own website. And as I say, I ran a shop for the summer. And that gave me a lot of opportunity to see what sold to the French. And I also discovered I have a lot of Dutch customers locally that have, again, a slightly different style to the French. And so I realised that I need to get my website translated into Dutch as well. But yeah, my original goal was just sell it all online, put it in French, people will buy it. And now I realise that actually I need to get physical stock made and out there in actual shops versus Britain, where I can put it on the website and market it online and people will buy it that way. And that was a big change.
I bet it was. But at the same time, I don't think I've ever seen a business plan go to plan.
No, I think that might be the other thing to point out, as I didn't do my business plan. My business grew almost organically from when my son was born, with people saying, "Oh, that's really cool, you should make it and sell it." And I just sort of set up a Facebook page, as you do, And looking back, I wish I'd sat down and done a proper business plan with somebody, because I looked at business plans templates, but I didn't really understand. I'm intelligent. I know what the words say, but I just couldn't really understand, how do I find somebody? How do I know where my target audience is? I don't know. I just make this, I'm not my target audience because I don't have the money to buy my stuff. And so it's really hard to do that. So I'd say, yeah, I needed to have done my business plan much, much sooner.
Sure. And I'm going to ask you now, given all these wonderful experiences that you're sharing, what would be your 3 tips for a new business starting out? Let's say they're going to be multinational like you are.
Yeah.
What 3 tips would you give?
The first is the biggest one, is register. Do it all legally from the word go, because I've seen so many businesses that think they can get away with marketing for 3-6 months, or selling the odd bit here and the odd bit there, and that they don't need to tell a tax man, and unfortunately it also means they probably aren't insured, and in this day and age you just can't afford to run a business without insurance. It's just not worth it. So yeah, do it all from the start. Register, make sure the tax man knows, make sure you've got insurance, and make sure you've done a business plan and sat down with somebody to work out where you want your business to go. I think organic growth is great, but you also need to keep that goal in mind of where you want to end up for it to actually work. I think the second big tip I've got is that you need to not undervalue yourself. I think especially people that are hand making are very, very quick to undervalue. We see so often the cheap supermarket pricing, and people are scared that no one will buy it if I charge what it's actually worth. If I spend £20 on materials and I've spent 2 hours making, no one's going to buy it for £60. And that's, even £60 is cheap, frankly. But people are scared of valuing themselves at what they're worth. And I think from the word go, it's much easier to say, this is my price, this is my worth, this is what I need to be earning to actually make a profit, as well as maintaining my machines, paying for the electric, the internet, the water, everything else that goes with running a business. It's much easier to set your prices higher than try and put them up at a later date, because you suddenly have attracted the wrong customer base. You've attracted people that want clothes that are worth £5-10, and that's just not sustainable. I think my third point would be to get a good team around you, especially other businesses. It's amazing how much I've learned from chatting to other similar businesses. Yes, they're my competitors, and I have to keep that in mind at all times. But they're also a wealth of knowledge, and if you're on the right side of people and you're helpful to them and friendly with them, they'll help you. And when they can't do something, they're likely to pass customers on to you, and that makes a huge difference. That networking with other small businesses and having the support of other small businesses, even if it's just to go on a group at the end of the day on Facebook and say, oh, it's just not working, I just need a hissy fit for 5 minutes, and to have people go, oh, I know the same, sending you virtual chocolate and virtual cake and what have you. It makes a huge difference.
Great tips. Really, really good tips. And I like the mix of practical advice and reaching out. And looking inside yourself as well for some comfort and confidence about going forward in what you do. Which are all, a lot of business is life lessons. So being able to charge what we're truly worth has also a lot to do with how we value ourselves. The two go hand in hand. And often when we grow as a business, we grow as a person as well. For all kinds of reasons, because of the trials and tribulations and because of the great feelings we get from succeeding and overcoming such things. Your story is such a carefully poised one, Victoria. I'd actually love to catch up with you in a year.
Yeah, that would be great.
That's, see what's happened in that time, because you're at this great point where you've made these wonderful changes and they just need a little bit of time to blossom.
Yeah.
So tell us, what do you believe will change for you over the next year?
For me, over the next year, I want to see my products being stocked more locally and beyond just the immediate towns around me, but, on a wider basis. And I want to get to the point where my business is able to provide me with financial stability. I'm not saying that every month is going to be the same income. It's not the same as a salary. but I want to know that if my husband loses his job again, which is what happened back in May,